And good afternoon, everybody. So, thank you for being here today, and we really greatly appreciate your attendance and I'm sure active participation today. I'm Henrik Schatzinger, and I am the co-director of the Center for Politics and the People. We are happy to have Alex Lasry with us today, who is the co-owner of the Milwaukee Bucks and a Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate. Mr. Lasry has been a leader in the Bucks transformation into one of the premier NBA franchises, or shall we say, the premier franchise, given that the Bucks are national champions. He has been serving on the company's management committee, and he has been leading the efforts to rebrand, the team's rebrand that established a new global identity that reflects the growth, energy, and innovation in Milwaukee and Wisconsin. Mr. Lasry also has been instrumental in bringing together the public-private partnership to build the Fiserv Forum, which is really a fantastic arena, and the Deer District. Additionally, he helped negotiate the historic project labor agreement and the labor peace agreement, which included a $15 minimum wage. He spearheaded the Bucks Vote Initiative and several racial justice efforts. Lasry also led the successful effort to bring the 2020 Democratic National Convention to Milwaukee, serving as chair in the bid effort. He was Community Leader of the Year, named by the Milwaukee Biz Times for his efforts around the convention. In terms of our proceedings today, I will engage Alex in a conversation, and maybe after about 20-25 minutes, we'll open it up to questions from you, the audience. Please join me in welcoming Alex Lasry. All right. Well, Alex, again, thanks for being here, and I'm just wondering if you can just share a little bit more about your background and why you ran for office.
Yeah, so I'm Alex Lasry. My family, we bought the now NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks about 7 or 8 years ago. I served on the leadership team since we've owned the team. Before that, I worked in the White House. So I worked for President Obama during his first term. I worked for Valerie Jarrett, who was a senior advisor to the president. Before that, I interned on the Hill. I interned for Senator Chuck Schumer. I led the bid to bring the convention here, and I've always had a strong passion and belief in public service. It kind of dates back to how I was raised and how my family kind of got to the United States. My dad was an immigrant. He was born in the Jewish quarter of Marrakesh, Morocco, and came to this country when he was about 7 or 8 years old, looking for a better life and opportunity. He always says that his story couldn't have happened in any other country other than this one. And that's something I've taken to heart, and I've always believed that we should be giving back, and that's something that he's always believed, and that's how I was raised. And so public service is something that's always been a passion and a strong belief of mine. What I saw firsthand being on the Hill and in the White House was how much government can do that's good if the right people are in office and if the right people are working in government. And I think we've also seen very recently how much damage the government can do if the wrong people are there. And so one of the reasons that I decided to get in was because I wanted to make sure that we were able to have the right people in office who could do good. And one of the things that I've been most frustrated with is the fact that we keep sending politicians to Congress, or we keep electing them, and they make all these promises and nothing gets done. I've sat down with them. I've had them in my office, in my living rooms, where they've said, like, "Yep, we're gonna, get to Washington and do this." And then 6 years later, they come back and say, "Well, I know we didn't get to do that, but this time, if you elect us again, we'll get to do it." And for me, I think what's going on in DC right now is a perfect example. And one of the reasons I wanted to run, because I think we need people with a track record of having gotten things done before they run for office, and that's why I'm running, because we have that track record, and I think we're going to be able to go to DC to bring people together to actually accomplish some things.
Yeah, thank you. As someone who studies American politics, I often look at poll numbers, and one thing that kind of strikes me as kind of maybe almost like sort of shocking is that if you look at, when people are being asked, is this country on the right track or on the wrong track? Over the last 20 years, week after week, a majority of Americans say that we are on the wrong track. So roughly 60% of Americans believe we're on the wrong track, and about 30% or so say week in and week out that we are on the right track. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, look, I think one of the problems that we have right now is that we constantly see, there's this belief in the American dream, right? That no matter who you are or where you come from, where you live, that you have the opportunity to get ahead and to succeed. And while that I still believe is true, I think it's just become increasingly harder to have that story written and to have that opportunity. Right? Our public school education system is crumbling. The infrastructure for public school education, we continue to see divestment in public school education and in our university system. We have things where we have funding for transportation to connect parts of Wisconsin, and then decide, nope, we actually don't want it. We have, I think, a ton of crises. I mean, if you think about just the last 20 years, we've had 3 life-changing and shocking events that have happened to us. We had 9/11, then we have the Great Recession, now we have COVID. And it just feels like that there are all these shocks to the system, and we keep having people promising that things are going to change, and nothing does. And I think that's where people are getting frustrated, and people are saying, look, it's not that I'm looking for government to solve my problems. It's not that I'm looking for government to give me handouts or do everything for me. But government should at least be there to help. It should be an aid to allow me to succeed where might otherwise not be able to, and it should be an aid to be able to help me have a fallback if something happens, right? Like we should be able to have healthcare so that if I want to go start a business or if I lose my job through no fault of my own, right? It's not like COVID was in a lot of people's business plans on how they were going to prepare for their business to succeed, and it happened, and it's through no fault of anyone's, right? But people lost their job, and then people lose their health care, and then people lose their business, and I think people are getting frustrated saying, I'm playing by the rules, I'm doing what you're supposed to do, right? I'm working hard, trying to color inside the lines and play by the rules, and unfortunately I still don't succeed, and yet I see all of these other people, either whether it's corporate executives who fail and maybe don't play by the rules, getting these golden parachutes. I see banks who have did unfair lending practices or a lot of speculation in the markets that led to a financial crisis. And yet I don't see any penalties or problems for them. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of people just getting frustrated. And then I think finally, the news out of Washington is always problematic. You don't hear about the great pieces of legislation or Congress coming to to see a crisis and fixing it and making sure that we're prepared for the next one. And I think that's where a lot of people are just getting constantly frustrated in how our political system is working for them.
Yeah, thank you. And earlier you said if you elect the wrong people, they won't get anything done. And I'm wondering, in terms of sort of the gridlock and the degrees of polarization that we're seeing, what would you do specifically kind of to make the situation better in terms of also cooperation across the aisle?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think polarization is anything new, and I don't think partisanship is anything new, right? Like, there have been different parties, and, if you go, as far back, I mean, the hit play Hamilton, there was literally a duel between people who didn't like each other, and so partisanship and debate and infighting amongst parties is not something that's new, right? That's what our political system is based off of. It's campaigning, trying to win the argument, and then going into office and doing what's right. I think what's changed is a lot of people now aren't going into Congress or going into government to actually do things. You're seeing a lot of people going in because they like the power that it gives them, or gives them some more Twitter followers, or, they get to go on TV. And people aren't there to actually do the job. And I think that's one of the issues that now we have is we don't have enough people who have the experience of knowing how to get to yes. We don't have enough people who have experience in, to negotiate a deal, that means I'm not going to get 100% of what I want. And to know that that's okay. Because if you get 80% of what you ask for, or 75% of what you ask for, that means that's progress. And I think that's something you only know if you've actually negotiated deals or been a part of something where you've had to actually get into a real negotiation. And then I think, quite frankly, I think the filibuster has become, and I think gerrymandering, and people are also, living in places that, you don't see as much political diversity in thought. You kind of start to congregate around more like-minded people, and it's leading towards more, where the elections that matter are the primaries. And it becomes a lot harder to get people who are willing to work across the aisle, and who are willing to compromise a bit. And quite frankly, I think that the other thing is you've got a lot of people who are, we've got to kind of change the political system to allow for there to be a feeling that getting something done is rewarded. And I think right now obstructionism is rewarded. And we see it all the time, right? Democrats control the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. And what's going to happen? Republicans are going to obstruct, a ton of what Democrats want to do, and claim government's not working, government's broken, and a lot of people don't understand the minutia or care about the minutia of, hey, the filibuster is what. And so I think one of the issues that we have to solve is, how do we make it so that when voters vote for people, whether it's Democrat or Republican, right? I understand that getting rid of the filibuster means that we could have a 2016 election where Republicans control the presidency of the House and the Senate, and then they get to pass, what they want without the ability of, Democrats to block anything. I get that, but that's what elections are for. Is you have that debate, and hopefully you win that argument, and your party gets elected, and you should be able to do what the voters asked you to do. And then if they don't like it, they vote you out in the next election. That's what elections are for. And I think that's where we're starting to just see, I think obstructionism is being rewarded, whereas I think before it was, if you think about 20, 30, 40 years ago, I think you wanted to be able to deliver on behalf of your district. You wanted to bring federal resources back, and you wanted to be able to show that you went to Congress and did something. And now, a lot of it's become, I went to Congress and stopped something from happening, and I think that's dangerous, and it's why we continue to have these crises with nothing changing.
Looking at your sort of campaign issues, two of those issues that you have identified as important ones for you are social justice and then a workers' bill of rights. I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate a little bit in terms of why did you choose those issues, and what does this workers' bill of rights mean, and how would you really go about moving those issues forward?
Yeah, so, for me, I think when we look at, how do we make an economy and a society that's fair and equal, right? It's not trying to say that anyone should have more of a leg up than anyone else. It's saying that we should all be treated equally and all have an equal opportunity. And I think that's where social justice comes in. It's basically trying to say, hey, we want to make sure that no matter your zip code, you can get a good public school education. We want to make sure that no matter where you live, your kid can, ride their bicycle out on the street without worry of, something happening. Want to make sure that, if you're, that no matter what anyone can have the same opportunity to get a loan to buy a house. And I think those are the type of things that we're talking about when it comes to social justice. Just how do we make sure that the playing field is equitable? And how do we make sure that everyone feels like that they've got a fair chance and that you don't have to be born on a certain street to be able to succeed, or you don't have to be born in a certain suburb to be able to succeed. And no matter where you are, if you work hard, if you play by the rules, that you're going to be able to have a life where you can afford to give your kid a good education, put food on the table, and live comfortably. And I think that's something that people are looking for, and I think that's what we're talking about. And I think when it comes to Workers' Bill of Rights, what I'm trying to just say is, look, workers should have a say in the place that they're working. We need to make sure that workers get protected, and that I think a lot of times when we have these crises, the brunt of the pain hits people who are working rather than necessarily the business owner. And I think what we need to do, quite frankly, is make sure that we're setting up a bunch of win-wins. I want businesses to succeed, and I want workers to succeed, because the only way you can have a job is someone's got to start a business or have a business to be able to employ someone. And the only way that business can succeed is if there are people who want to work and are going to work hard to make it succeed. And so a lot of the things that we've even proposed are things like, how do you create tax incentives to incentivize the behavior that we're looking for? And so, if you're, again, just as an example, if you're Amazon, right? If you get rid of the Trump tax cuts and you say, hey, and this is not my proposal on the number, but just for numbers' sake to make it easier. Let's say the corporate tax rate's 30%. Well, if you want a tax break, you've got to pay your workers $25, $30 an hour. Great, now your tax rate can come down from 30% to 25%. If you allow your workers to unionize and have a say in the company, great, your tax rate can come down. If you bring your manufacturing and supply chain operations back from overseas and invest in America, you can get a tax break. And I think these are the things that we want to incentivize so that companies and workers are all winning. Because look, I'd rather American companies, I want Amazon to do better than Alibaba, right? I want American companies to succeed. I want, Ford to do better than, another car company. And so I think that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about how do we make sure that we have these win-win situations so that Americans are succeeding, the companies are succeeding, and I'm all for incentivizing that type of behavior and making sure that if you're doing the things that will help grow this country and grow our economy, you should be rewarded for that. And I have no problem with companies making a lot of profit. I want to make sure small businesses can grow and make a lot of profit. I think that's great. But I also think we need to make sure that that's not coming on the backs of the people working. And at the end of the day, if it says, hey, we'll incentivize you to pay people a little bit more, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
As a German, I'm a little bit nervous about German car manufacturers, what you just said. But I have a question that kind of reminds me of an infamous presidential campaign debate moment where George H.W. Bush was asked about his background, his privileged background, and whether he could understand really the worries and sort of plight of the average person out there. So I want to ask you the same question, but the one thing you should not do, well, looking annoyed is a little bit difficult to detect with a mask, but
you can't see my facial expression.
But looking at a watch, sort of, was the other thing that he was engaging in. So let me ask you this: sort of, how do you respond to this sort of concern that you may not really understand how the average person out there feels?
Yeah, look, it's a completely legitimate question, right? And what we've said is, look, don't look at our back. When you're looking at my background, look at what I've actually done. Look at what we've accomplished, and the values that I've grown up with. Again, I said, we're not the Rockefellers. My dad's a first-generation American from his family, the first kid in his family to go to college. Went to Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, and they had no money when they came here. They spoke no English, and the way my dad was able to get by was getting a good public school education. He learned how to speak English from watching local news and reading the encyclopedia. That's why he's got such a breadth of useless knowledge. And so, I would say, he got that. He was able to work his way through college, right? He worked at McDonald's while he was, in college, and he was able to work his way through. And he graduated without a crushing amount of debt. He actually found a good union job for a little bit. He was a Teamster driving UPS trucks. And I think that, that those values that, I saw in him and that I've seen and that he's taught me, I think is one way. I think, look, I've spoken with people who work at Fiserv Forum. I meet with them and talk to them all the time. And hearing their stories about how much a $15 minimum wage matters, about how much working somewhere where they feel like they're, a part of the team and treated with dignity. We hear Joe Biden talking all about one of the most important things about work is dignity and the dignity you get from that. And that's something we've tried to instill and appreciate at Fiserv Forum and throughout the Bucks. And I think, look, when you look at the people who are supporting the campaign, right, we're the only campaign in this race to have union support. Whether it's from the Teamsters, IBEW, IATSE, we're been able to get a ton of support from local and statewide electeds, people who have worked with me and know what we've been able to do. And I think that's the most important thing that I've tried to tell everyone is, look, if you're looking for someone whose credibility or what they're trying to say is like, hey, look, I've run for office before and that's why I should be elected again. Okay, I want people who, if they've been in office or haven't, can show me a track record of actually having gotten something done. Because the one thing I know is if you want to get promoted at any job or anything, you've got to show a track record of accomplishment. You've got to show that you've been able to actually do something and not just put out press statements or get into partisan fights. You've got to be able to actually get the job done, because otherwise you're just going to do the same thing when you get to Washington. And so I think that's where we're trying to differentiate our campaign and how I think we're being able to show that the policies that we're promoting and the creativity that I think we're coming up with in terms of how we're going to get the economy back on track and how we're going to make sure that it's working for everyone, I think is something that's different, and we're talking in a different way than any other candidate in this race. And so that's kind of how I think we're tamping that down. And then quite frankly, it's just meeting people, right? The best way to show someone that you care is to actually show up. And that's why we're traveling the state and not taking any part of the state for granted, right? We're going to go to places that Trump won 90%, that Ron Johnson won 90%, and say, hey, I'm not going to be a representative for just the 50-some-odd% of people that vote for me. We're going to be a voice for 100% of the state. And, that's going to be talking to people that don't always agree, but that's okay. That's what this is for. And if you want to represent I'm running to be senator of Wisconsin, not senator of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. And so I think that's what we need to start telling people and letting people know. And look, I'm a proud Democrat, I'm a proud progressive, but that doesn't mean that I'm not also going to be here to represent people who don't agree with me. And I think that's how Tammy Baldwin's done so well. That's why she won by such historic margins. I think it's how Barack Obama was able to do so well. And I think that's how we're going to be able to do well as well.
Maybe just one or two more questions before we open it up to the audience. But I wanted to just maybe, people who come here, people who are watching this on YouTube or watching it on TV, I wonder, they want to get to know you, right? And so I'm just wondering, is there anything about you that, isn't on your website, that people, that you want to share with them about your personality or about your character that maybe isn't obvious or they haven't heard or things of that nature?
Oh, man. What about me? I mean, look, I would generally say, look, I think of myself as like a fairly normal guy, right? Like I, have a wife, an 8-week-old. Feels like sometimes an 8-year-old, but have an 8-week-old. I love to play basketball, golf. I'm just kind of hanging. I obviously love to go to Bucks games. But look, I think for me, it's pretty simple, right? Like I want to be able to do things that are going to have a meaningful impact for people, and that is going to be able to give back. And I've tried to help lead the Bucks in that way. I tried to, when I was at the White House, make sure that we're able to do the things and promote the president's agenda. And now in this race, trying to just talk about the issues in a way that's going to I think be able to reach as many people as possible. But I don't know. I mean, I guess if there's something anyone wants to know about my life or personality, I'm a pretty open book and don't really have anything to hide. So I'm happy to answer anything. I guess on the spot, I'm pretty crappy at being able to come up with something.
Well, thank you. I have more questions, but I think it's important to give people the chance to really ask what they are interested in. So I want to open it up to you and see what questions you have.
What are the hallmarks of what would be a successful private-public financing relationship? We've had some successes here in Ripon with Alliance Laundry in Fond du Lac County with Mercury years ago. And we've also had some failures as the state. So what are the things that I should be looking for that would let me know this is apt to work out, or this is someone's taking a rider on state money?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what we promised when we came here was that the arena was not going to just be it wasn't going to just be an arena. It was going to be a jobs plan. It was going to be a development effort to really transform west of the river that hadn't seen development, and an area that hadn't seen development for 20 years, 30 years. And that, we were going to put, also our money where our mouth is. And that, I think then the guidelines that the state, the guardrails that the state, the city, and the county negotiated with us, I think were really important to ensure that as we built Fiserv Forum, we had to employ people from the city of Milwaukee, from the state of Wisconsin. So in that, 40% of the people had to have been unemployed or underemployed in the last 5 years. We exceeded that. I think we're at 43, 44%. The professional services contract, so not just the workers on it, but the contracts that were going to be used to help build Fiserv Forum. So the professional services, 25% had to be minority-owned, women-owned, disadvantaged businesses. We exceeded that and went to 30%. So I think trying to make sure that any sort of public-private partnership has a strong community effort in it as well, and making sure that if we are building something, that there's a commitment to making this a jobs plan for your city and your state, right? Like we basically said, hey, look, we're not going to be bringing in construction workers from Illinois and having them come and work on Fiserv Forum, because that's not helping the Wisconsin economy. Making sure that we sourced 80% of the materials for Fiserv Forum from the state of Wisconsin. Making sure that we were doing those type of investments and trying to create those jobs. And I think, look, the biggest thing is making sure that you've got a partner on the private side that's committed and invested. And I know that was something that I remember there were a lot of talks of who are these people and are they going to really be invested in the Wisconsin community? And I think we showed that, yeah, we are. And you see it now, which is the arena, but the entire Deer District and how now that's spreading to even more development. But the biggest things are going to be making sure the state creates those type of guardrails so that, or the county or the city creates the type of guardrails to make sure that that this is going to be something that's going to economically benefit the area through jobs and through contracts and through through sourcing the materials. And then I think also, look, some of it's going to have to be, you've got to kind of look in the eye of the partner and say, okay, you know what, I know that this is going to be a good thing, this person cares, and trying to make sure that, hey, this is someone that we can trust that's going to do something. I think looking at the track record of even a deal like Foxconn, probably could have guessed where that was going to go. And that was, again, a lot of big promises and a lot of money. And I think tax breaks are not generally the way to go on a lot of it. I think if you're trying to do that, what you want to do is say, hey, in this public-private partnership, we're going to help it. Hey, we need to also see that you put it up. And, we made sure that we had our skin in the game, just as much, not just on the arena, but in all the ancillary development as well. We wanted to see that succeed. And so I think those are the important things. And but making sure that you also see it as, hey, this isn't just about this building. This is about getting people to work and getting, people who don't always have the opportunity to be involved in something this important have that opportunity. And that's why we had the 25% professional services contract as well.
Yeah, I think one hand that was up very quickly was this gentleman.
So, I think of running as a senator as being an individual, but you've probably used the word we 50 or 70 times. So tell us about who we is.
Yeah, we is just, I really hate saying I. And when I look at anything that I've done, we've done is, I try to talk about the state, the city, the community, right? Anything that's happened has been done together. And, while I might have chaired the bid for the DNC convention, it was a team effort for the community, for the state, with the mayor, the governor. When I talk about anything, I think anyone that's done anything, it's something that we've done together. And, I generally am just really bad at saying I. And so when I say we, I might say it might be the campaign, might be just kind of all the people I've worked with to get stuff done. But more just I'm not used to saying I, just because I don't believe that anything is done by any single person. It takes a community and a team effort to get anything done.
Let's go over to this side of the room here. In the back, there is a question. Yeah. Or yeah.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I have a question. I was thinking that this is a very diverse state. It has city workers, breweries, Epic, just all kinds of people. But the state was started with farmers and probably breweries. And there's farmers, and there's still plenty of small farmers, but there's mega farmers too. And there's a need to watch over water management and making sure people don't overstep their boundaries as far as neglecting the ecology of the area. We have prisons. We have more people in prisons in the state of Wisconsin than anywhere else in the United States. The United States has more people in prisons than any other country in the world. And I was thinking that that's kind of hard. And also there's people that want to legalize marijuana because there's a zillion things you can do with it. And many other states are profiting from it, as well as taxes would be excellent for the general public. So those are the questions I'm looking at. Do you have people, or are you going to have a group of people that can advise in these areas? Because they're so far apart.
Just to kind of summarize the question was about how would you get sort of expertise on various policy issues, ranging from farming all the way to marijuana and the high prison population and so on. Sort of maybe how do you learn, and sort of how do you come to your own conclusion?
Yeah, look, I'm not someone who ever believes that I know everything about everything, right? That would be a very arrogant way to be, and I don't, quite frankly, I don't know everything about everything. But what I try to do is do the best research that I can, try to talk to not just experts, but people on the ground. Like one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing is going around, not just talking to business leaders, talking to workers, talking to farmers, and saying, hey, look, sure, I can read some, think tank article or essay on agriculture and figure out and learn a little bit about that. But what I've kind of learned is the best way to actually know what's going on and what can actually make a meaningful difference is to go talk to people on the ground. When we were first looking at building Fiserv Forum, it's not like any of us had ever built an arena before. So what do? We traveled the entire country, went to 30, 40 arenas, went to a few even internationally, and asked them, hey, what are the things that you learned? What are some of the things that you would have done differently? What are the things that you liked and wish that you had, kind of even hit a little bit more? And so I think that's the same thing. It's traveling the state and trying to say, hey, what are the issues that are facing you, and how can we solve them? Because I think a lot of times, we too often think that being a senator or being a representative is doing immigration reform or Obamacare, right? Like these big national issues. And a lot of times, really, being a senator or being in elected office is trying to make sure that you're passing things that aren't always going to be on the front page of the Washington Post or read CNN or MSNBC, but trying to fix some things that would have a real meaningful impact on people's lives. And I think that's something that Tammy's been so successful at, and I think that's something that the best people in Congress are able to do. Are able to say, okay, great, I'm not as worried about Twitter fights or meet the press or anything like that. I care about actually doing the job, and that means going to people that I might disagree with, maybe talking to people that, in across the aisle or within my own party, and saying, hey, how can we reallocate these funds to my state? How can we change this rule or regulation to either protect people a little bit more or allow it to open up because it's strangling the innovation? I think those are the things that we don't talk about enough because, look, it's not sexy. It doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. But it's some of the most important work that you can do. And so for me, the way I get the expertise is, one, you've got to, kind of read the news and try to read as much as you can. But it's also just getting on the ground and talking to people as much as possible. And it's why we've traveled the state and why we're going to continue to go everywhere, not just once, not just twice for some photo ops, but going there 3, 4, 5 times, building those personal relationships and connections and really learning about what you can do. And it doesn't stop when you become a senator. It's not like all of a sudden you got elected and now you know everything. Now you get elected and you have to still go and say, okay, hey, what can we do? How can we help? Because what I've learned mostly is that a lot of the issues that face the state of Wisconsin aren't rural or urban. They're Wisconsin issues. Right? We've got clean water issues in rural Wisconsin. We've got clean water issues in urban Wisconsin. Right? We've got access to health care and good education issues in the northwest part of the state. And we've got access to healthcare and education issues in the southeastern part of the state. Access to broadband. That is not something that is just limited to rural Wisconsin. We have those same problems in Racine and Kenosha. Right? These are the things that I think we too often, think are dividing us. When I think all too often these are the things that should be uniting us, and how do we solve these together, and stop thinking about the only way to solve this problem is to take from this area to give to this area. But that's not what I believe. I don't believe politics is a zero-sum game. I don't believe policy is a zero-sum game. We have the resources. This is the United States of America. We have the resources to be able to invest and solve these problems. And as the economy grows, that's going to mean the pie is going to get bigger. But we all too often hear a lot of politicians say, the United States of America is the greatest country on earth. And then, oh, no, we don't have the money or the ability to do anything. And that to me doesn't work. Either we're the greatest country on earth and we can solve these problems, or hey, we don't have any money. Right? It doesn't work both ways. And so I am of the belief that we are the greatest country on earth, and we have the ability to solve these problems if we want to, and stop playing political games with people's lives.
We have a question from a Ripon College student, Nicholas.
Good evening, sir. So just a little bit about myself. I'm also, I serve as the president of Ripon College International Relations Club. And so with China being a major market for the NBA, and then also, of course, for Wisconsin agriculture, they've used economic coercion in the past to try to get either businesses or NBA teams and players to toe the Communist Party line. And I was wondering if you had ever thought of what you could do to be able to protect those industries and businesses if the CCP tries to use economic coercion to try to damage businesses or players and people here.
Now we're getting to the fun stuff. Look, I think when you look at any of our relations with any country, not just China, but Russia, the EU, anywhere, you're dealing with really delicate international relations that a lot of the time have to do with economics. And what I think we need to start doing is making sure that, as you said, we're protecting our companies that are overseas and making sure that the government isn't the one that's kowtowing to the economic line, right? And I think that's sometimes where I got even very confused with a lot of the issues that you were talking about, which was you have these Republican senators complaining about someone's statement on China, and I'm like, well, you're in government, you're in the U.S. Senate. Where's your bill to help protect the people in Hong Kong? Where's your bill or your ability to move and push at the time the Trump administration to play a heavier hand? And I think that's something that we need to make sure that, again, as a senator, while you don't direct foreign policy, you have a microphone and you have influence and you have the ability to say, hey, we're going to stand up for what's right and we're going to protect our businesses and U.S. interests. And I think this is also where we come back to, look, we're in a global economic environment, right? We are not going to become isolationists. But we also have to make sure that we do is say, hey, we're able to stand up for our values and our principles without any of our businesses or our economy getting hurt. And I think it's a very difficult line. I don't envy any of the presidents that have to deal with something like that. But I also think that's up to Congress to start legislating and making sure that they're passing resolutions, passing bills that say, hey, when it comes to trade deals, that we're actually negotiating trade deals that have protections for free speech, that have protections for workers' rights, that have protections for for fair trade. These are all the things that you can do that all have to get through Congress. You can't, as a senator, say, hey, LeBron James, you should say this. What are you doing? But what you can do is say, look, as the U.S. government, our policy is X. Our policy is to say, like, hey, we don't agree what's going on here, and we want to stand up and do something about it. And I think that's something that I found a little hypocritical from a lot of people at the time who were criticizing certain people for their statements when they were actually in a position to do something. And again, this is the problem that you see in Washington all too often. It's very easy to fire off a tweet and not have to worry about anything after that. It's a lot harder to actually govern and do the job. And I think too often we have people who are interested in that quick statement rather than actually digging deep to solve the crisis. Hope that answered your question a little bit.
Do you have a follow-up question?
I did want to ask, so just to get into a bit more specifics, like when the Australians haven't towed the party line of what the CCP has wanted, the CCP hit Australian wine, they hit Australian barley, they hit the meat industry. And of course, for here in Wisconsin, when the United States hasn't played ball, the Chinese hit the soybean industry and the agriculture. And so, have you had any thoughts of, like say, being able to create relief funds for when these industries are getting hit for essentially things that are completely outside of their control, or being able to, provide some kind of either government support or, just, regulatory support, if you will.
Look, I'm a big believer in if something happens that was not on your radar or business plan, or it was an act of God or government that was through no fault of your own, you shouldn't be punished for that. That's unfair, right? If we decide, hey, you're growing crops and you're farming, and then all of a sudden the Trump administration decides to get into a dangerous trade war that is affecting your business and your way of life, that is not something that you can necessarily prepare for. Right? I went to business school. We put together business plans. You don't put together a business plan that says, oh yeah, there's going to be this deadly pandemic, and here's how we're going to be protected from it. Or all of a sudden the government is going to engage in, this risky trade war, and all of a sudden now I can't export in the same way. Or my market has shrunk because of, not bad business practice, but government practice. And look, at some times, maybe the president feels, hey, we have to engage in this to, stand up. But then, as you said, then we've got to make sure that the people who are being harmed by that aren't being harmed unnecessarily, because that's also then, quite frankly, it's going to make it a lot harder for you to stand up for that belief and that policy when your constituents are being harmed unnecessarily. And so the same thing with the pandemic, right? It's not like anyone had in their business plan, hey, I think that this is about to happen, and here's how I'm going to be protected. And like all of a sudden I'm a restaurant, and I'm totally prepared for no one to come into my restaurant for 6 months. And that's not something that you're prepared for, right? You'd say like, yeah, if no one came to my restaurant for 6 months, I'm probably going to go out of business. If something happens through, not because you were an idiot or because you had a bad business practice or a bad idea, if you have a bad idea, that business should fail. We don't need bad ideas. But what we do need are people who have a good idea and who is running their business successfully and well to be protected if something happens through an act of God or through something that they couldn't control. And I think that's something that we need to make sure that we're more prepared for. And that's why, again, we need to start putting those policies and funds in place before the crisis. All too often we govern crisis to crisis and don't think about, okay, how do we actually make sure that if we know there's going to be a crisis, right? And it seems like we have one every 10 to 15 years right now. If we know this is going to happen, let's prepare for it. Let's make sure that we're ready to handle it before it happens.
Let's go to Professor Emeritus Scott Hannaford.
I've enjoyed and applaud so many things you said. One of the general problems that the nation faces is the explosive black communities, and Milwaukee, of course, has a pretty serious problem there. I wonder if you have any thoughts about how this could be approached in a general or specific way.
The explosive what communities?
Black communities.
What do you mean by explosive?
I mean, they have drive-by shootings. I mean, they have burnings, and they are troubled with abuse of.
I don't know that.
Man.
Yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily agree that there is that this is a problem because of black communities, right? Like I don't think that's not the case at all. I think what
I mean in black communities.
Oh, in black. Okay. I mean, look.
They have.
Look, there are drive-by shootings. There's violence and crime in every community. This isn't just subject to one community. This is an issue in a lot of communities. I think, but what we're trying to talk about, and I think what we need to make sure we're doing, is how are we investing in one? Again, I keep coming back to this. Education is a silver bullet for a lot of things. If we can invest more in public education in all of our communities, it becomes a safe haven for our kids. It allows people to be able to get educated, and then whether it's college or community college or trade school, It just allows people to, I think, what we've seen constantly is the places with some of the best schools are some of the best communities. And we need to make sure that it doesn't matter that you're living in a wealthy community to be able to get good schools. No matter where you are, you should be able to get a good public school education. I think we also need to make sure that we're investing in public safety, not just police, but public safety, right? I think all too often we ask the police to do things that they're not trained or equipped to do. And that's why we've seen some of the issues that we saw a couple summers ago. I think what we need to start saying is, okay, is this a thing that the police need to come to, that someone with, a police officer with a gun should be showing up for? Because sometimes the best person to come is a mental health professional, a domestic violence professional, a social worker. How do we make sure that the right public safety person is coming to handle that situation? And then also making sure that we're investing more in police training. Look, I want Giannis practicing every day. Right? I don't care. He's a two-time MVP and now he's an NBA champion. I still don't want him to stop practicing, even on a game day. He's going to shoot around and he's practicing. We all know that the best way to make sure that you are prepared for a situation is to make sure that you've trained and you've been thrown into it, right? The military is practicing and training all the time, and that's why we have one of the best militaries in the world. We need to make sure that we do the same thing with our police so that they're ready to tone down a situation that feels like it could be getting out of hand, and to make sure that they can handle whatever is kind of thrown at them. And again, it's a really hard job. No one is trying to say that it is an easy job. But what we need to make sure is that we're equipping our public safety professionals and everyone with the best that they can have, and make sure that they've got the resources they need. And then quite frankly, look, I think we've got to start seeing development and creating jobs and raising wages in all of these communities. I think, one of the things that we see in Milwaukee is there's development happening in the downtown, but, not on the north or west side or south side. How do we change that? How do we create development and create jobs and connect the city in a way that allows people to be able to get around and open up the labor pool so that no matter, if you live in one area, you can easily commute to work in another without having to worry about, driving a car. How do we make it so that it's, cheap and affordable for you to be able to get around the city? And again, how do we make sure that when we are creating development in parts of the city, that we're not kicking people out of their homes? And I think these are all the public policy questions that we have to get a handle on. And it's not one thing that you can do. A lot of these things are very intertwined. I still think the best thing we can do is make sure that we are just investing heavily in our public education. I still think like that's one of the top things, make sure that we're investing in teachers. I think if we do that, you'll see a lot of communities grow. But I think, again, the one thing I would say is that there's not a violence issue or anything issue in the Black community. There's violence all across the state and in any community. I think what we need to start seeing, that what we do have is a lack of investment in a lot of our minority communities, and we need to start to increase that.
We have time for one or two more questions. There was this question from another student.
Yeah, so I find a lot of politicians are always looking towards re-election, and I'm not saying don't ever look towards re-election, but they base off all of their decisions based off, will this make me look better, or is this best for our country? How will you make decisions that I guess aren't necessarily more toward how are you going to balance that?
Yeah, I mean,
Just maybe as a summary kind of the question. The question is about sort of guiding principles and beliefs in addition to paying attention to constituents.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a fun, you can always give like the fun political, and it sounds great, right? To say, I don't care about re-election, I just care about the constituents. But at the end of the day, if you're doing right by your constituents, you should be able to get re-elected, right? They shouldn't be things that are opposed to each other. What I also think, though, sometimes is you hear a lot of people say, yeah, I voted for Obamacare, and I got voted out of office, and I'm still proud of that vote. And I think that's the mark, I think, of a good public servant. Is someone who said, yeah, I might have lost my election and put my re-election at stake because of that policy, but that was the right thing to do. And for me, look, being a senator is not a career. It is a job in public service. And I have always said, I would rather be voted out of office because I tried to do things and accomplish things and spent that political capital, rather than playing it safe and trying not to get anyone upset. To me, that's not doing best for your constituents. Now, it doesn't mean thumbing your nose at everyone either. But what it does mean is, look, if there's a good piece of policy that I think is good for Wisconsin, I'm going to vote for it. It's not going to necessarily be, what the polls say about it or anything. If you get voted out because you voted for, a good piece of legislation, so be it. These are not supposed to be careers. These are not supposed to be things where you are, there for 100 years, right? And
Like Chuck Schumer.
I'm not going to cast aspersions on anyone that maybe I'd be working with. But again, what I would say is, and what you shouldn't be doing is, and I think a lot of times what we see is, politicians are always looking for what's the next thing I'm running for. And so how am I going to, if I vote for this or if I take a stand on this, how is that going to play for the next election I want or the next office? And that's why I think you see so many politicians at all levels don't have a real record of accomplishment. It's just like, yeah, I've put out statements on this and then I ran for this and I've been successful, and that's why you don't see a lot of record of accomplishment on a lot of things. So for me, it's going to be, I will always vote how I believe is in the best interest of the people of Wisconsin. And that's going to be my guiding principle. And if you lose because of it, then you lose because of it. But if you end up leaving public office feeling like you left that office and your constituents in a better place and with better policies and a better chance to succeed than when you got in, that to me is a job well done and a public service job well much succeeded.
Maybe one more question here. When do we go over here to this side of the pool?
So affordable healthcare, even at $15 an hour, that's $2,000 take home a month. When you look at healthcare.gov, to get south of a $5,000 deductible, you're looking at $400 or $500. So that's 25% of someone's take home. What's your plan to make healthcare more affordable?
Yeah.
Again, the question was, what's your plan to make healthcare more affordable?
Yeah, look, I believe in let's start with the opening premise, right? I believe that everyone should have access to healthcare and it should be affordable, and everyone should have access to good, affordable healthcare. That should be a universal right. I believe the fastest and most efficient way to get there is through a robust public option. I think that's where the votes are, and I quite frankly think, look, how Mayor Pete kind of described it when he was running for president was Medicare for all who want it. I think that's a great policy. If everyone ends up wanting Medicare, then everyone will get on it, and that'll force the insurance companies to adapt, or they'll go out of business. If unions want to be able to negotiate better healthcare packages, through private insurance, or a business wants to offer it as an incentive, then they should be able to. And if you don't want to be on that package, you should be able to be on the public insurance. It shouldn't be that if you have this job, you are stuck with that insurance and you can't be on the public option. A robust public option means if you want the public option, that is your right and you can have it. And if you want your private health insurance, it should be easy and seamless to transition to the public option if you decide to leave your job to go start a business. Because I think one of the things that we also see with healthcare is that it's also economically a plus for everyone to have healthcare and not worry that, if I leave my job and I want to go take a risk and start a business, that I'm not just risking the business that I'm about to start, but I'm also risking my health and my family's health. That is something that no one should have to make a decision on, and it's bad economics if we do that as well, not to mention immoral. And so for me, a robust public option is, I think, the way to go. A Medicare for all who want it, I think, is the smartest and best play for universal affordable health care. And look, I think at the end of the day, at least everyone in my party agrees, universal health care is the goal. I think there are a bunch of different ways to get there, but the goal is universal health care, and I don't think anyone should disagree with that. We should all have the ability to have good, affordable health care. I know he had his hand up.
There was a question here, yes?
Well, my original question was going to be about healthcare, but you pretty much answered it. A related thing is, I've heard that the median price of a house in California is now $800,000, and that the median price of a house in Wisconsin is over $300,000, heading toward $400,000. That's the median, not the average. Do you have any way of making that lower without paving over the whole country?
The question is about housing costs and the inflation that we have seen.
Yeah, one of the things that when you talk to a lot of mayors around the state of Wisconsin, and you say, hey, what's one of the, what are the top few issues that you need? It's transportation and affordable housing. And it's something that is, quite frankly, a really big problem, because we're seeing it all over the state. There's a lot of people looking to, who are looking to buy that just can't afford to buy the house, and it's jacking up prices. And you're seeing it all around the country, but especially here in the state of Wisconsin. And so I think what we need is, when you look at the Build Back Better plan that the president's proposed, and you look at a lot of the proposals, we need more investment and more funding for affordable housing. And I think, look, one of the problems we have right now is there's not a ton of supply, and the cost of building new housing is expensive. And so I think what we have to be able to do is figure out a way for the government to be able to help out in funding for more affordable housing units. I don't know that there's much else we can do other than trying to put some more demand out there for people to be able to have an affordable place to live. But I agree. Right now, between healthcare costs and housing costs, you're spending close to 50% of your income, maybe more, on just those two things. That's a lot. That's not how it's supposed to be. And so, I think how can we make sure that we're injecting more affordable housing into the market is one of the top issues that I hear across the state.
Well, I want to first of all thank you for your questions. I want to thank you for coming tonight. I also want to thank Alex for being here tonight. So let's give it up for Alex Lasry. I also want to, of course, invite you to our next event, which I think the next 2 or 3 events will actually be webinars after we've done some of these in-person events. So next week, Wednesday, I believe 6:30 p.m., we'll have an event on the demise of local media and what that means for political participation. I can tell you it's not a good thing what happens. There's a brand new book that just came out by Cambridge University Press, one of the top presses, by 2 fantastic scholars. And so if you want to register for it, please do so at the ripon.edu website, and I hope you can join us for that conversation. So thanks again for coming, and have a good evening.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.